Do you believe that we are already at our last panel, which is e-commerce? So I invite conference speakers to come on board. Okay, hi, my name is Ayoub, and I'm the new moderator because it was supposed to be Julie Cormier from ONB, Opportunities New Brunswick. She couldn't make it, she has no voice left. So I'm gonna try to be at my best and be indulgent, please. I'm gonna read the question, but before that, we have first remotely from Amsterdam, we have big companies here. CGI with Gohar, Sargsyan from Amsterdam. So how are you, Gohar? And we have another big company, well known, I think, Amazon. And we have also Shopify, which is we're very proud of, Canadian company. So I'll let you introduce yourself, Gohar, and we'll go from there.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much, Sam. My name is Gohar Sargsyan. I'm a director responsible for sustainability, partnership and innovation. Recently, I started focusing on sustainable finance. As all of you know, CGI is IT business and management consulting company employing approximately 90,000 employees worldwide, and headquartered in Canada, in Montreal, and I'm based in Amsterdam. Thanks.
Constantin, let's go with you.
Yes, hi. Thanks, Sam, for having me here. My name is Constantin Gisler. I'm neither Canadian nor do I work for a Canadian company. I'm here based in Brussels in Amazon's EU representation. I'm a senior manager there for public policy, primarily in the economic policy field.
And hi, I'm Kostas. I work for Shopify. Super happy to be here among friends, partners. And it's also it's a big pleasure because Shopify is a Canadian company, but created by a European and German entrepreneur, Toby. So I think the EU-Canada Business Summit is at the heart, at the core of Shopify.
As I said, that the cocktail break or the break that we had was sponsored by Shopify, so thank you again, Costa, for that. And I'll jump into the first question, and I'll read it actually. How will the Digital Services Act, DSA, and the Digital Markets Act, DMA, address the growing societal importance of an online platform? Maybe I can start with you, Constantin.
Yeah, happy to. We're obviously one of the companies that are, if not targeted, at least kept in mind with the drafting of these legislative acts that were just finalized by the EU legislator a couple of weeks ago and have now popped up in the official gazettes. Maybe a bit of step back. What is the Digital Services Act? What is the Digital Markets Act? I mean, the Digital Markets Act is a set of new rules that is quite similar to competition law in the classic sense, but there is a major departure in the approach that is taken. So there was a recognition, or at least an underlying assumption, that ex post competition law enforcement, so in the past there would be an infringement which would then be remedied by authorities after the fact, was no longer sufficient, and therefore the EU took action in this space and has now proposed rules that outright oblige companies to do certain business conduct and outright prohibit even other business conduct. And that's certainly news for us. It's a heavy regulatory intervention, and it certainly received a lot of interest both here in Brussels circles, but of course also worldwide, because there are other regions where similar things are being considered at the moment. So Digital Markets Act in that regard is probably quite an important piece of legislation. It's yet a little bit early maybe to say what impact it really will have, because The European Commission now needs to set out over the next couple of months, first of all, which companies will be designated so-called gatekeepers, because the rules will only apply to a rather small amount of companies. We're talking about maybe 10, maybe a dozen of companies at maximum. That could be big tech, maybe a couple of companies more, yet to be seen. And those companies then would have to bring their business conduct in line with the rules only by spring 2024. So at this stage, it's a bit hard to say which companies will be in scope and which of their services will be in scope, and then subsequently, what do they actually have to do. So that's the Digital Markets Act. When you look at the Digital Services Act, they're often named together. They're, so to say, sister or brother legislative proposals, but it regulates a completely different space. There we're talking about how do online platforms deal with illegal content? How do they react to notices that something illegal is happening there, and how do they take it down then, the content, or take other actions? Now, the Digital Services Act is a bit different in that it's not a revolutionary piece like the DMA, but it is, in a way, a reconfirmation or development of existing rules already. So we do welcome the fact that the EU has reconfirmed the rules that have already existed in the e-commerce space for about 20 years, but has further refined them. There's certainly some new obligations there, much more due diligence to be done by online platforms in future. And in a way, it is a recognition of the societal importance that many platforms nowadays play for democracy, for public discourse. And that's maybe, and then I conclude there, that's maybe our only criticism of those new rules, is that the Digital Services Act has a new category, so-called very large online platforms, which are set at more than 45 million EU users. That's news. These companies will be subject to much stricter rules, and they will also apply much faster, already by summer 2023. That's very fast. And so now, what we do criticize a little bit is that while certain types of services, social networks, maybe search engines or video sharing platforms, do have the societal impact, we question a little bit whether on an e-commerce marketplace, customers shouldn't be able to expect the same quality and safety in the services across the different companies and services they use, no matter their size. They should always be able to shop in confidence in the service. And that's the only aspect where we're maybe a bit more critical, but otherwise we think that the Digital Services Act is actually a balanced piece of legislation.
I think I would agree with most of what Konstantin just said. Starting with DSA, I think that's the easiest one because, as Konstantin said, we have principles about liability of intermediaries online, and it's very important that these principles are repeated and even strengthened in the DSA. It's also important from a business perspective that there is one set of harmonized rules across the EU, because as most of you in this room know, doing business in Europe can be challenging because of the complexity and the legal fragmentation. So more harmonization, more legal certainty is always a welcome step. And also the fact that DSA is more tailored to the needs of SMEs, because I always say that in Europe we should adopt legislation that is SMEs friendly, because European companies are SMEs and should not start with adopting legislation that applies to global companies and then start excluding SMEs. I think DSA was a positive step in adapting some of the obligations to the SMEs. DMA is more complex, it's innovative. I think no surprise that we're still waiting to see how it's going to be implemented. There are a lot of gray areas where we need clarification. It goes back to the point about legal certainty. But as a principle, if the objective is to create this open, competitive, innovative digital space in Europe, allowing SMEs, entrepreneurs, companies of all sizes to compete on the merits of the service and have equal access to the market, this is welcome. The question remains how it's going to be implemented and how it's going to be enforced.
Gohar, do you have a say on this?
Indeed. First of all, I agree. To add a point in those acts, I did my, thorough research, and from looking from the perspective, let's say, like CGI perspective or large platform perspective, it is important that it has to be the impact of society and the societal importance has to be considered from the origin of the platform. It has to be the societal security, privacy, and ethical aspects considered from the level of platforms. So it is in Europe, especially, we have additional GDPR rules, which are multiple, of course, risks to be mitigated in order to have the most positive impact. But everything else, I agree with my colleagues, which were mentioned in the panel. Thank you.
Okay, now it's working. All right, I'll jump into the second question, which is the year 2022 came with a conjunction of multiple challenges. How can the retail industry will fully and sustainably recover from the supply chain disruptions that we are facing today? How a more resilient approach can be developed to logistics? I'm tempted to ask you first, Kostas.
Go for it, pleasure. So the starting point is like, the way we think at Shopify is like, yes, these are challenging times. They are challenging times for big companies, but mainly for the small SMEs, the entrepreneurs. But also every time there is like a structural change and tough times, this is the moment when entrepreneurship really blossoms. So this is an opportunity. And as a company, a technology company, we're always thinking of like, what are the tools? How can we remove pain points from SMEs, from entrepreneurs, allowing them to go online, start a business, grow, and run it more smoothly. I always say this as a joke, is like, sometimes I share information with colleagues on the commercial side about Eurostat studies, saying like, 50% of European consumers think this is a problem for cross-border sales. And in 2 hours, I have someone from the product team saying, do you want me to build a product to solve this problem? I was like, dude, no. Like, let's discuss about this. But this is the role, the responsibility of companies, provide technology solutions, remove the bottlenecks, make e-commerce easier and smoother. And then also companies need to rethink about their strategies. I think like, we're talking about e-commerce, retail. We're coming from COVID, there was a boost in e-commerce, online. Now we're still trying to see what's the future of e-commerce, retail, offline, online. It's a combination of everything. And retailers, merchants need to rethink where they're going to find their customers. And the customers are everywhere. They're on TikTok, they're on social media, they are on all platforms. So merchants need to start reflecting on this and adapting their strategies. And of course, there is a role for policymakers and governments to support SMEs at these difficult times and remove bottlenecks, provide financial aid. Yeah, it's a combination of everything. Policymakers, companies, and SMEs all need to work together.
Is there anyone who wants to answer that question? Gohar or Konstantin?
Yes. It's because it is dynamic and it is required changes, and based on the all challenges which is happening now. The market is very dynamic. That's why it is needed to have the change mindset and agile management practices to be in place at the boardroom. And also adopt new risk management framework within organizations, every time adjusting to the changes. So I think this is just simply adding on what Kostas said. The organizations have to be ready for changes, and in order to thrive, they need to be agile themselves, starting from the management.
Okay, now can you ground us, as we're not expert on e-commerce, how e-commerce is now vulnerable to inflation as anyone else, and to any other industry, just like any other industry? How do you cope with that? I'm really interested to have those answers from you two.
I can have a go. So yes, inflation is hitting the e-commerce, the retail sector, but for the moment, quite interestingly, not as hard as we would expect it. I think, and it's my personal view, that we're going to see more pain and more difficult times next year. For the moment, the data we have is that, yes, consumers are changing, they're more careful with their spending, but they're still willing to spend before the holiday season. They are more careful, they favor quality over quantity, but still they have not reduced significantly their spending. But as I said, this is data, we're still at the beginning of these difficult times. I think it will be more difficult like next year.
But do you think there's going to be a difference between just conventional retail and e-commerce, the impact of inflation? What would be, from your point of view, the difference between those two?
By conventional, you mean like brick and
Just
mortar?
going on the, on the street and to do some shopping compared to e-commerce. What's the inflation impact on us, the customers? Are we going to tend to more buy with e-commerce, or to still go, what's the percentage or the difference of percentage between those two, if you have any idea on that?
It's difficult to say, but what we've seen is that consumers are really divided. Like, I expect consumers to go test products offline and then go online and buy it, or do the other way around, do the research online and then go to the shop and buy it. And this is really like divided, it's like 50-50. So I think this is a trend that we continue to see. Yeah.
Anyone is welcome to comment.
Happy to come in on that one. I mean, Kostas just said it, we had a dramatic growth during the COVID period. If you look at Amazon, we've basically achieved the growth that was forecasted for 3 years within 15 months in the span of 2021 of the first COVID phase. So that was dramatic. That was a strain on, of course, on the infrastructure that we had already, and we had to expand that. If you look at Europe alone, we've added 65,000 jobs last year. And that, of course, also means now, with a more mixed economic outlook, with inflation cutting into real wages, pushing up the costs for companies, that we will need to be a little bit more careful also with these investment decisions in future. So when you look at our last quarter report, we just announced that we're going to balance a little bit more the investments that we take, and of course still focusing on the key strategic bets for the future, and definitely still focus on delivering a good customer experience. But yeah, with a more mixed economic outlook, companies will think a little bit twice what's going to happen there. Whether there's a big difference between e-commerce and classic commerce, I don't even think so. I mean, it's ultimately, it's, as Kostas said, it's two different channels, but it's the same market. Customers, of course, will look for good value, and maybe they will compare a little bit more. Maybe that will increase a bit the pressures on companies. But other than that, other than focusing on our core mission in a way, providing convenience and a good shopping experience, there's not a lot more we can do. Other than, looking at our cost structures.
Gohar, do you have any take on that?
Yes, regarding to the impact of inflation, the way I'm thinking also of the e-commerce, it's not exactly the same as in other industries indeed. However, I think it will be higher prices, less available stock, and also some more hesitant shoppers. With regard to the companies, in my opinion, the revenue-wise, it was already mentioned just now by Konstantin and also Kostas, it's going to be fine. I mean, the inflation has impact, in my opinion, on other areas, such as higher prices and better quality and more critical customers.
Thank you. I just want to point out something about Canada. We were talking about a lot of natural resources. Canada is a real, as I stated right from the start of this summit, is a real hub for AI and technology. So just bear in mind that. So the next question is how AI will have a crucial role in managing the supply chain, including production, freight, warehousing, inventory management, and shipping. So we're really into the supply chain challenges.
Yeah? Yes. So I think the answer to your question is very easy. Yes, AI is going to revolutionize, optimize the supply chain. It helps, it's a powerful tool that allows our merchants, SMEs, to optimize procedures, to manage their inventory, but also from a customer experience. I can try on clothes online, see whether it fits. It's all thanks to AI. So AI is here to stay. Just to say that Europe is like a little bit behind. You mentioned Canada. I think North America is more advanced in terms of developing this technology for different reasons. Regulation is one of them. Also, there is an AI Act, AI regulation currently being discussed in Europe. We need to be careful with how we frame this legislation. And one example is like Shopify recently acquired Deliver, which is like an American company, and they use AI to optimize supply chain. We need more companies like Deliver also in Europe. Like we have great minds. Think of Rotterdam, for example, a long tradition in managing the supply and logistics, but we need more European companies to scale up. So we need to make sure that the legislation, the regulation we have in place does not act as a competitive impediment for European startups.
Yeah, totally subscribe to what Kostas just said. I mean, AI, or if you use the more technical terms, in our case, machine learning-based systems, already today actually play a huge role. When you look at a company the scale of Amazon, these are decisions that can no longer be taken by humans on a manual basis. When you look at Amazon, the usual customer expectation is that something they search for on our store is usually available, is in stock. And that is actually a huge challenge when you have more than 400 million products that you sell across more than 185 countries. So it is cost prohibitive to have everything as surplus in stock. It's just simply not possible, which means the importance of these IT systems is huge in our case. So we have now a supply chain optimization team. We've had that for more than a decade, that has moved from purely statistical models, from past historic data-driven models, to machine learning-based systems that are self-learning, that are even learning from past mistakes in the predictions. So when you look at these systems nowadays, I mean, in the past, we were able to predict relatively easily products with predictable consumption patterns, say diapers, trash bags. That is relatively easy, but it becomes much more complicated if, for example, you have a new video game, or take the trend for comfortable sweatsuits during COVID. That spike was something that was really hard to predict, but that our systems had to react to. And I think that's now where we are, at the point where this variability in the demand can be predicted much, much better by these systems. And that's certainly something that we're going to see much more of in the future, especially when we're talking about e-commerce, where the scale is a completely different one.
Gohar, anything to say on this or not? You don't have to.
Yes, I would like to add that, because AI is a good news for a company like CGI, because of course, due to the nature of the organization, technology and business consulting company. So of course, it will, I echo what Konstantin and Kostas said. Just want to add, yes, it will be scaling. AI it will be scaling and also predicting future shipments, and it will be more increased visibility into the whole process and allowing better decision-making and also improved customer service.
Good. Jumping to the next question, which is a kind of a long, or I should say complete question. What does the e-commerce unstoppable trend mean for corporate sustainability commitments? Many companies have comprehensive sustainability programs that have been implemented throughout their entire supply chain. So what impact does an increase in e-commerce activity have on these? And finally, what do environmentally conscious consumers want from retailers when it comes to delivery? Very complete. There's 3 questions in one, so I'll let you go on that. Who wants
if you want, can go ahead. I mean, it's of course a topic that we probably should have a whole panel dedicated to. It's super important, and I think that's also something that the companies have realized. I mean, there are some aspects that are actually a bit surprising even about e-commerce, so a bit counterintuitive, but many people do not know that e-commerce in many regards is actually has a lower climate impact than classic bricks and mortar retail. So we've commissioned an independent study on that a year ago, I think, and we've come to the conclusion that classic bricks and mortar retail has 1.5 to 2.5 the climate impact on greenhouse gas emissions, for example, which, when you think about it, is not too surprising, because you doing an individual trip with your car to buy one item is a lot less efficient than having a delivery truck with 100 or 200 items in there. The sales space, the energy consumption of classic bricks and mortar is something that needs to be taken into account here. That all said, of course, the companies do realize, and in our case, in Amazon's case, definitely realize that we need to play a role in the reduction of the climate impact. So in Amazon's case, that meant that in 2019 we took a major initiative there and co-founded the Climate Pledge, which is nowadays signed by more than 300 other companies, a pledge to reduce carbon emissions to net zero and in 2040. And that is 10 years ahead of the Paris Agreement, and that's certainly something which we can see now across different industries, companies going out and making these additional efforts. In our case, it's hard to give now a comprehensive overview of what we've done in the area, of course, but just to mention maybe 2 or 3. I mean, we've, for example, reduction of the weight of packaging is a major initiative for us. Since 2015, we've reduced the weight of each individual shipment on average by 38%, saved about 1.5 million tons of packaging. Those are these little things you can do that make a huge difference when you have companies at that scale. We're nowadays one of the, or actually the biggest corporate renewable energy buyer worldwide, and now run 85% of our business on renewable energy. And that's also projected to go further up in the next coming years. And I think just a month ago we announced that we're yet again spending €1 billion over the next 5 years in Europe to decarbonize and electrify transport here. That goes from cargo bikes up into electrified vehicles to transport goods more sustainably to our customers. So we definitely see that it's something that customers also ask for.
Yeah, that's a perfect bridge, because I want to mention that one of our concerns during this time is like, what will be the impact of the current economic environment on consumers and those climate-conscious consumers? Because there are a lot of consumers who say, you know what, I want to buy sustainable products, I want to do my best. And so far, we just got the numbers yesterday, so it's like the majority of consumers are still willing to buy more sustainable products, even if that means a bit higher prices. They also, like 65% of consumers, are willing to do more research to make sure that they buy from merchants who have more sustainable practices. And at Shopify, we are a technology company, so we start thinking like, how can we help our merchants be more sustainable? Because there's a consumer demand, so what's the tool we can provide to them? So we developed an app, surprise, surprise, we call it Planet, and it really allows customers to offset the carbon emissions from their orders. And the cost is like 3 cents per order. So that allows them to respond to consumer demand, also allows consumers who are more like climate aware, climate conscious, to make better choices. And as a company, Shopify, again, being a technology company, we invest in technology. So there's a lot of talk about emissions, reducing emissions, but no one is talking about the carbon that is left in the atmosphere once we remove all the emissions. And there's not a lot of market for this, so we try to create a market demand. So together with Stripe, Google, Meta, we create this fund. We call it Frontier, and the idea is like really to invest on startups, technologies that develop the technology to remove carbon from the atmosphere. And it's our pledge to other companies to join the effort, because there's not a lot of talking about carbon removals.
Right, absolutely, Gohar.
Thanks, Sam. I just want to start actually from the statement you put forward that many companies have successful strategy with regard to sustainability, and it is implemented across the entire supply chain. Yes, indeed, they are. Just want to let you know that from the experience we have, although it is those companies, although try to implement those sustainability perspective, let's say agenda or strategy towards the entire supply chain, but still it is very difficult even to understand and agree on the common term of sustainability. So one of the biggest challenges today is the scope 3, which is basically the whole supply chain that you don't have, the organization doesn't have any control. And to have the correct and validated data with regard to assessment and really truly understanding what the scope 3 brings with regard to sustainability. But I agree that the organizations are putting lots of efforts these days to make sure that, especially in this entire supply chain, is able to be monitored, to be measured, and to be compliant, especially coming with the European regulation. And with regard to the consumers, totally agree with my colleagues that consumers demand these days that the products they purchase will improve the environment, reduce waste, reduce carbon footprint, and so on. And with regard to the delivery and shipping, it's about goods that they purchase, and also about the packaging, and it's about transportation. The consumers, there was recently a study published in Forbes, and you can check that based on the study which was conducted, and the questions were asked to the e-commerce companies and also the consumers, the two different groups, and the result was that there were only small percentage. It was only 3% of consumers who gave a reason that they want to be a good citizen. That's why they want to purchase sustainable products. The rest were seriously considering environmental and climate change and also sustainability objectives. So from that perspective, I'm more positive that I think not only the companies, but also the society is in line with taking up sustainability challenges to the next level and tackling these issues towards climate targets.
Thank you very much. We're at our last question. So looking to the future, before we do that, before I ask the question, I would like the audience to think of questions to be asked, because I want to have some questions from the audience before we go to the cocktail reception. Just a reminder that we are live also for Canada, so Canadians can they have access to the summit just right now, as in Europe here, right here in Brussels. So the last question is, what retail will look like in 2030? How AI, touchscreen, smart glasses, interactive apps, we're really into the future, will play a role in the e-commerce of the future. Who wants to comment on that? And after we'll jump into, I hope, questions from the audience.
So I don't know what e-commerce will look like 2030. I can tell you about next year or 2 years. Things are changing, consumers' habits are changing, consumers are everywhere. So we see a major trend with social e-commerce, like TikTok is a major channel where consumers actually discover brands. So retailers and merchants need to go to those channels and find the customers wherever they are. I think the offline shop is not going to be like the main channel to reach consumers. It's going to be just a marketing tool, one of the many. And retailers need to think about how to build a customer experience, because future of commerce is going to be about the customer experience. Consumers are becoming more demanding. There's going to be more interaction. AI, as you said, is going to be part of the game. It already is. So retailers need to adapt to that. And there's also like the new trend towards Web3. I think we love talking about tokenized e-commerce. There is this group of consumers who love using the digital wallets. They are proud of it. And if they can plug the digital wallet when they visit a store online or offline and get a different experience and be able to use NFTs, and customers and merchants can use NFTs to build a relationship with their customers, this is a reality. And then we need to think how to build this e-commerce and adapt.
Gohar, do you have a say on that?
Yeah, a little bit like a science fiction. Of course, I don't know what it will actually look like, but I saw some examples on some imaginations with regard to the future of e-commerce. One of the things which triggers my attention, if it's about a physical store, I think these days it's even possible to do that, although there are lots of cameras should be installed in one room, but the consumers can just go into the shop and pick up anything they want and just walk outside. And any product within the shop should be perfectly recognizable so that they can automatically take out the money from the digital wallet. But this is about the physical part. But regarding to the virtual shops, of course, digital wallet is one of the things. I was also happily working with one of the projects recently. That can be a potential, I think, that customers would like to use the digital wallet in the future. But with regards to some other gadgets or just sitting, I think consumers will spend more time at home. There will be more, like going to the shop will be more customer experience. And also, I think there will be even products just bringing it via drones or something else. I don't know. I'm just trying to be a little bit imaginative. However, definitely there will be more digitally driven.
Thank you, Gohar, for your imagination. It's more than welcome. The audience, do you have any questions? Maybe we'll start with one person here. The same person. I remember you've asked questions.
I talk a lot. Sorry.
Can you present yourself, please?
I'm Maite Grisot. I'm Belgian. I'm a business consultant, and I like to move from industry to industry and make links. And so he comes on. And thank you very much, because my question is a bit about what you just said. We talk a lot about AI, but at least indeed the Web3 is something that is coming, and that has really a big potential. Are you, as an e-commerce platform, both of you, and I guess CGI, but mainly both of you, rethinking the way that you bill and that you do your services, and thinking about how it can be decentralized and evolve into a Web3? And also, do you see your e-commerce platform becoming NFT marketplaces as well?
Yes and yes. So I can tell you that Shopify is obsessed with NFTs. Token-gated commerce, that's what the product team, they really love the idea and the potential of building loyalty, relationship between customers and consumers, customers and merchants. It's for the moment, like on Shopify, at least in Europe, we do not have our own system, our own NFTs, but we are also like an app platform where we allow our partners, our app developers, to develop a technology and integrate it in the shop of merchants. So that's a big thinking of our strategy, commercial strategy for the future, also for Europe.
I have to admit, I don't have a good response for you yet. It's certainly a very exciting topic. I mean, decentralization, if you ask that question, of course, to a big platform, is very centralized. It's certainly an interesting topic for us to follow. I haven't heard any announcements yet about NFTs on Amazon. I think we look into a couple of the technologies, the underlying technologies, certainly also on the Amazon Web Services part of the company, where we are the technology provider, a little bit more like Shopify for other companies. But on the retail consumer side, I'm currently not aware of any initiatives.
Gohar, do you want to comment? You don't have.
In line with CGI perspective.
Thank you for your comment. I guess it was short. We're not going to go back. But okay, one final question, and there's the question here. If
it's not actually a real question. It's actually how I see the future. With the metaverse, we will have a whole new experience of buying stuff, of feeling stuff. We can try a product without actually having it. We can try it in the metaverse. We will be able to share a product with multiple users worldwide without having to actually come from one place to another. We will be able to go to multiple universities. We can do a study at University of Ottawa and in the same time do a study at University of Brussels. We will go to Canada without going there. We can visit it in the metaverse. So there will be metaverse shops, and I'm sure Amazon and Shopify, they're already investing in this. So we will have in 10 years, we will have a conference with people here from everywhere in the world without actually being here. And that will be the future. And they are investing in this today.
Until then, maybe next year you're going to be a conference speaker at the next summit, I guess, hopefully. But I mean, go to Canada. It's more, it's more pleasant to go to Canada. That was our last panel. I thank you very much for coming here, and I invite you, for those who registered, to the cocktail reception at the Salle de Lorraine, and it's going to be pleasant. There's going to be drinks, food, and networking also. See you next year, and then at the cocktail reception. Thank you.